And we ought to really hear this, everybody online, everybody in this room. You know, I've one of my mantras is there is nothing wrong with you. And I've had people go, oh, yeah, you don't know me. There's a lot wrong with me. But see, you must understand that that type of languaging, that type of speaking to yourself as though something is wrong with you actually perpetuates codependency. Because if you have that kind of inner dialogue within your own self towards yourself, the more you have that, then the more you live in what's referred to as the fight or flight response. Because when you denigrate yourself, you talk to yourself in any self deprecating way, then quite naturally, your beautiful system doing what it's meant to do goes into survival mode because it's like, good God, this, this vessel of a being is doing themselves in by the way they're talking to themselves. Like you've got to be your own best friend. And that's why that real simple mantra of I am all right right now. That's really where this came from. It's the codependent and recovery's mantra. I am all right. I am is a state of being. All right is content, good, right now, affirming the present moment. I am all right right now. When I first started my first yoga boutique, I had yoga books in there and I had every codependent book you can imagine in the shop because that was a really big focus of mine and one of the reasons I got into and started yoga in the first place was because of my serious codependency. I was very much a victim because the chief codependent, or sometimes referred to as the chief enabler, is often going to, show up as a victim. When I said when we first started, after all I've done for you, you know, and so that's really how I started. And so my bookshop is usually filled with, or especially in the day, was always filled with what I was currently really, really, really focused on and working on. But when I started really opening my mind and preparing my mind for this talk a couple of weeks ago, it really brought up to me, particularly during the pandemic and the things that have been occurring, that we're always in recovery. And I really realized how important it was that I paid attention to this codependent issue or codependent behavior really for the rest of my life because it can be very easy to slip into. Because typically, particularly the strongest codependents, like the ones that fix everything and responsible for everything, they're usually quite brilliant individuals. So I'll share with you some traits that I found about the strong chief enabler codependents. They're really quite brilliant. They're often the ones that are in charge of things that need people in charge of things. They're often the ones that are, raising the let's lead everybody to healing, let's get well, let's lift up our eyes. So there's a really, really bright side, a very light side to the human aspect of the person that's learned this codependent behavior. But the distinction is that very thin line between what is compassion, which is the first precept of yoga, compassion or behaving in a way that is non-violent, non-cruel. Okay. And so there's a very thin line between codependent pleasing others so that you're pleased, and a thin line between that and then caring for another completely out of choice and with boundaries. A codependent does not have boundaries. A person that's in a serious state of codependency even will feel very afraid to set boundaries because the person might leave. Like in this questionnaire that you heard, the person also may be very afraid to make decisions on their own if it's going to upset the other person. Because why? because the codependent does not want people to leave. Usually there's some separation anxiety, even if for a little bit, even if could be, even if for an evening or a weekend, if you're apart from your main people that you're codependent with, you get quite anxious or feel a degree of anxiety because the codependent's key behavior is all about control. I do for you so that I can control things. But, I don't want to make that word control an ugly word. It's important to know that the reason that feeling or that need for control is there is fear. Because as a little, when you are a little being, one of the ways that we survive is we start to look to try and get control of our world. If we weren't surrounded by people, that had a real sense of their own big ass self, didn't have a sense of or a distinction between their healthy being and then their unhealthy choices, were very denigrating toward themselves and then therefore would maybe offer that to you. You could have been, I was kind of coined in therapy many years ago as the parentified child. Sometimes the child becomes more like the parent or, and then kind of becomes the victim or, but all in all, what we're really talking about here and the way it comes into adulthood is when we're little, we just try to get control of things because it doesn't feel stable. We're not sure of where things are going. We may not be getting our love needs met, like the love language may not be there. So to survive, it's all survival. It's the survival brain naturally kicks in and says, "Okay, let's get safe right now." So control's not a bad word. Control is something that we do when we are perceiving an unstable or unsafe situation or something, and that we're going to be rejected or abandoned or attacked or whatever the case may be. And so we all come by this quite innocently because we take those survival skills into adulthood. The only difference is that we get a lot more, a lot smarter in adulthood, and there's a lot of other ways that we can start caregiving for people and doing things for people. And a lot of times, really great people that are in, first responder type situations or caregiving type situations, people we really, really need, the survival skills that they had actually turned out as something really great that they were able to offer people in their lives. But the problem is that they're sacrificing themselves, right? It's like you get so busy kind of pouring from your own cup that there's nothing left over. And many codependents die in the face of caring for other people or really sacrifice themselves. Well, one would say, well, why wouldn't I do that? Because logically, first of all, logically, it's not healthy. It's not healthy for you or the individual that you are taking care of. I remember many years ago when I worked in intensive care. I worked in intensive care from 16 to early adulthood, and then and then part of that time I went to work at a physical therapist's office for a couple of years, and this was like so wild to me in how little they taught me to help the patients. People in intensive care, they're like, no, let them do that for themselves. No, whatever. One of the key messages was whatever they can do for themselves, you want to empower them to do it for themselves. And so, and the same thing in physical therapy. It was painful to watch what had to happen in physical therapy sometimes with people and to have to be the assistant to help with all that. But my physical therapist, she would always say, whatever it is that they can do for themselves, they must do it for themselves, no matter how much they cry, no matter how much they shake, no matter what happens when they come here, you're here to get them to do what they can do for themselves and to do it. And really, for all of us as healing codependents, the real message really is that when you are in relationship, your friends, your family, people at work, wherever you are, you want to cultivate, number one, a sense of self awareness so you can really see when am I crossing the line from, healthy boundary setting, supporting caregiving, over to I'm doing the job for them, over to, oh, if I want anything done, I've got to do it myself, over to resentment because you end up picking up the pieces when it all falls apart. That's codependency. Codependency has everything to do with I'm over here with nice caregiving, but then I jump over here and I try to control time. I start adjusting my schedule because I don't want to make this other person mad and I don't want to, but the truth is that the real healing of codependency is that I've got to say it, hashtag self-care is number one. And the first step in self-care is clear boundaries. Now, what do I mean by clear boundaries? Well, really, we learn this in yoga, right? I'll let the camera kind of follow my head back up. We learn in yoga, right, very clearly that we all have kind of this field, this energetic field. Like my body's here. My physical boundaries are people don't put their hands on me. There's certain places your hands don't go, right? I've got physical boundaries and my own personal space, right? That's my own physical boundaries. Some people that don't have that kind of boundary, they'll might come right up and get right in. Have you ever known anybody that kind of gets right up in your space because they don't have that boundary for themselves? Well, in yoga, you begin to understand that your field extends out, right? Your energetic field, densest part of your body to subtlest part of your body, about out so far, right? Kind of, sort of, but densest to subtlest. And the idea is that you really understand the recovering codependent or the healthy, compassionate person respects their own space. And you stay out of other people's space. So it's not just a physical boundary, but it's emotional boundaries. When we start crossing emotional boundaries with people, because most of us are probably not going to be crossing others' physical boundaries, but crossing into other people's emotional boundaries comes back to the questionnaire. Somebody is upset, we feel compelled that we need to fix it. In Master's Path training, it is at Rasa Yoga is the quintessential, healing of codependence. The whole process is the quintessential healing of codependence. The ability for you to respect your space and your boundaries and what you need to do to take care of yourself. And then you respect the other's boundaries. And I'm not just talking about like a physical localization. I'm really speaking more to the idea of emotional boundaries. I mean, how many times have you felt upset because somebody scowled at you? You're walking by and somebody goes, they make this sort of scowling face at you. How many times have you made something like that about you? Oh my God, I just walked into Rasa Yoga and everybody was just scowling at me. They were just scowling. I don't know. I had somebody, somebody had said kind of a while back, they thought, well, I just thought being in a yoga community, everybody was just going to be so happy and smiling. And I'm like, that's interesting that you see it that way because other people see it a different way. See, it's really that what boundary setting really is that you really understand that you see the world the way you are. You don't see the world how it really is. You see the world the way you are and where you are. So if you learn to really sort of reside in your own space, you start to get clear, then you start to see the world more clearly. So if somebody's over here and they've got a scowl on their face, then I might see clearly, oh, they have a scowl on their face. But the serious codependent, that's all about crossing other people's emotional boundaries, makes the scowl on the face about them, starts wondering about what's going on. Should they go ask them what's wrong? Should they offer them a piece of cake, give them some ice cream, pick up their plates for them, fix them, take care of them, jump in and do something to do what? To make that person feel better? No. Now, if I ask them, Mama, I just want to do nice things and make them feel better, it's like, no, you're not. It's not true. You're doing that to make yourself feel better. Because the truth is that we need the space. We need the space to be where we are. I mean, to learn to live with this mask of composure on our face so we're palatable to others. That is the height of codependency. How many of us heard from a parent, now, be nice and smile and just so everybody likes you? Most of us were raised and we were taught to make ourselves palatable so that we would fit in, right? So that we would fit in, or that we would be accepted, or that we would not be rejected, while all the while, in many ways, the source of that teaching, we were feelings of abandonment from them. And so it's like really understanding that to respect where a person is healthy behavior, allowing that person to be in their space. It's like, okay, so they're scowling. Why make it all about you? Matter of fact, just say, you know what, I kind of feel like scowling too. It's like that I want to do that too, but the codependent doesn't do that. The codependent doesn't really have any kind of sense of their own energetic space. They go jump in that other person's space and then make what's going on with them, with that person, all about them. And it's like, if you would just have a nicer face, I would be happier. If you would just change your behavior, then you would be so much happier. And then if you're happier, I would be happier. Well, guys, being a classic codependent in recovery and yogi, which I do feel that the opposite of codependent is yoga, because codependent sort of just discombobulated, sort of turbid, externally referencing the world versus internally referencing the world. A healthy individual sees the world from the inside out, has clarity. And what I mean by that is that instead of looking to others to define if you feel good or not, have any of you, and this is a rhetorical question for yourself, but let's say if you've got kids at home, a partner, or you go to work, and as that question asks, your mood was really pretty pleasant until somebody else fill in the blank. Why would we allow our emotional nature and our mood for the day to completely change because of somebody else's behavior? Why do we allow our world to be so affected because of someone else's behavior? Now, I understand, like if somebody's abusing you or mistreating you, right? Yeah, that's going to make me unhappy, but that's what happens to a codependent. On some level, they're either emotionally abused or physically or something's going on. And there's this sort of push-pull transactional nature to their relationship. Well, in Yoga Sutra 133, as I mentioned earlier, it talks about really holding a really, a high space of joy and appreciation for those that are virtuous, and really holding deep compassion for those that are cruel or, not as nice as we'd like them to be. But I mean, a codependent's not able to do that. Why? Because a codependent is so busy being cruel to themselves that the codependent could never know what compassion is. You cannot possibly hold a space of compassion, true empathy for another human being when you are cruel internally to yourself. Self-care begins with your inner dialogue. And that first inner dialogue, it has to do with the boundaries you're going to set with yourself around what it is that you are saying to yourself. Okay, I need somebody to repeat what I just said because this is of paramount importance. These are the main things that I want you guys to take away from this touching on. Who can repeat what I just said? Paige, go for it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. No, that's perfect. And I'll repeat what she said. But there's one thing I think's missing. I'm not sure. And it's setting a boundary around how you speak to yourself internally. Did you say that? You said that? Okay, I missed it. Okay, because that's really, really important, right? You've got to set a boundary. So it's like you've got to set boundaries. And this is the whole essence of yoga and why you train in mindfulness, getting your body, your breath, and your mind into this coherent space, because that's just the beginning. That's the foundation that you need. Because if your nervous system is like fried, right, you're just like supercharged and you're really turbid and your body's really turbid and your breath is jagged and that is not the best conditions to try and harness in your inner dialogue and how you speak to yourself. And but it so it's really, really important that the first boundary that you set is how you are speaking to yourself internally. And you need to you guys really need to find kind of a disciplined practice that you could do something like, when you notice yourself, call yourself a loser. Like, have you ever done something like you drop something on your ground, you're like, idiot? Anybody do that? Only one person. Nobody else does that ever. Okay, that's good. So you got to stop that. Because it's just not helpful. It's not going to help. So if you see yourself do that, the first thing is that you have the awareness to notice, oh, the name you just called yourself. You have to pause in that moment. Don't try to go to war with what you just said. Just sort of let it float on the river, right? Just let it go, but come back and go, no, wait, I am all right now. That's just the simplest one. That's the simplest, just I am all right now. But y'all, it takes discipline because I can't even imagine what it must be like for most people, like how many times a day those low level denigrating words or inner dialogues coming through your mind. One time is too much. 5 times is way too much. 10 times, 100 times is totally unacceptable. It's just not acceptable, y'all. You matter too much. And every time you call yourself a name or you call your behavior a name, your survival mechanism kicks in. And then because your brain's going, oh my God, what is this person doing? It's like the sympathetic nervous system goes into action. So you start feeling nervous or maybe feeling some anxiety or something like that. And it's so incredibly important that you withdraw from that cruel behavior. We get so caught up in kind of pointing the finger sometimes at people and how they treat others cruelly, but not one person has the room to be discussing anybody else's cruel behavior until you yourself have cleaned up the cruelty that you express towards yourself. And I'm saying that like firm mama, like I am not even, you don't see me smiling, I am playing around. Really, it's like when you go into that realm of that sort of cruelty of loser, idiot. Although they're just, I know there's even worse, like god awful things that people say to themselves. There is no space for that. And you've got to develop the discipline that it takes. Well, how do you get the discipline to first have the self awareness that you're doing it? Let it go, come back to your breath. And I am all right now, using different words like you self correct. The way you do it is you want to get that discipline in your body and your breath so you have that coherency in your nervous system, and there's not that sort of turbidity survival mode. And very simply, when you say to yourself, even as you're hearing me speak, repeat to yourself, I am all right now. Just silently say that to yourself, because what's going to happen, that's going to completely shift your orientation. When you say words like that, you will eventually shift into a more top brain down, for just time's sake, simpler way, into more of what we call creative mode, or into a more relaxed space, relaxed, and not in that mode of something bad is about to happen to me, because maybe when you were a child a lot of bad things did happen, but it's not happening now. And if it is happening, the way to make the shift is that's got to come from the inside out. Okay, so I am all right now. Then the next thing is we've got to really take a look at where we're trying to control people, places, and things. I'm not saying the word control like it's a bad word or a naughty word. You guys, you don't want to take anything that I share with you and then use it just as another, way to denigrate yourself, right? Judging yourself for judging, that's insidious. We don't want to start that type of insidious behavior, but just starting to look at, where am I seeking to control things that are not within my realm to control? Even for some of you, because I know a lot of you that are online, a lot of you that are in the room here, you work at places that aren't as functional as they could be. I mean, the world is filled with a lot of dysfunctional people, and they gather in organizations called businesses. Some of them are really big businesses, and they all come together and they behave in, 8 to 12 hours a day together in this big, happy, dysfunctional mess. Right. And this is a question I get a lot from people, because they'll say, but the thing is, I'm at my work during the day and I have certain results I'm supposed to produce. Because a lot of people too that are here and in master's path are in management positions, lead positions, school teachers, all sorts of very responsible positions. And a lot of times they're project managers in lead positions, and they're dealing, they got this whole like big dysfunctional codependent mess that they're trying to deal with. And I get this question a lot, and I used to do corporate coaching as well, and this question came across a lot. It's like, but the thing is I'm the lead in this. I'm the lead on this project, and I've got this person. They're not taking care of their results, so it's up to me. I got to go in. I got to pick up the pieces. And I'm like, but why? But if I don't, then the project's going to fail, and then it fails. Because if you cross a line and you start taking care of responsibilities, that's somebody else's responsibility, even if you're the lead person. You start jumping in and you start taking responsibility in a place that really wasn't your role to take responsibility for. That's codependency, big time. That's you trying to get in control so that this outcome occurs, when in fact, really what needs to happen is more maybe compassion for the challenges that the person's going through, instead of, oh my God, there goes so and so again, not doing the things that they're supposed to do. So I'm going to need to go in there and take care of it, or whatever the case may be. But instead, being able to either go to the person or whatever it is that's appropriate and say, hey, here's the deal. It was your responsibility to take care of this particular project, and it looks like it may not be happening. Am I seeing this? Am I seeing this clearly, or where are we? What's going on? If you're the lead and it's so your responsibility is to find out what's going on, right? Is to ask, is there anything you need? Like, you may even want to write this down or tattoo it on your brain. The codependent recovery statement is there anything you need? And when they say no, you go, okay. even if your group is going to look like a big mess because they're not taking care of their situation. If you are married and you ask your beloved because they're in a weird mood and they're not talking, or they got their stuff going on, or they're acting out, or whatever the case may be, and your job is to say, is there anything you need? If they say, yes, what I need is, and they fill in the blank, then if that is within your realm easily enough to help with that, then our world is so codependent that people that stop acting in codependent ways will often look like they don't care. The codependent will look at somebody that's in codependent recovery and be like, they don't even care. It's just so scattered. It's like this whole thing could fall apart. You know what? Sometimes things need to fall apart. But anyway, so back to the friend, the partner, the whatever. So really, right? Okay, so we're back in that control thing. So we talked about self-awareness. The main thing, you want to have the self-awareness that you want of how you're talking to yourself. Then you want to look at the places that you are trying to control, people, places, and things. Okay. Then the next step is looking at when there is care needed. Because, I mean, we don't want to turn into these harsh old narcissists that go to the other extreme. Sometimes, though, you do need to go to another extreme. I mean, sometimes part of healing is that. So I'm not dissing that. But generally speaking, to show care, and you guys in Master's Path, y'all have heard me say this a million times, if a person cries in class or they're hurt or there's things going on, there's a standard question: is there anything that you need? You see somebody crying, you don't walk up. The codependent walks up and goes, oh my God, are you okay? What's going on? No. The healthy person that has compassion lets them be where they are. If they're mad, if they're crying, if they're quiet, if they're scowling, whatever they're doing, the healthy, caring person or compassionate person just lets them be where they are. However, to care or to exhibit compassion and care, one of the best statements is there anything you need? Now, when they say no, what my therapist taught me about codependency, my first yoga teacher was a therapist. She called it duct tape therapy. Shut up. Shut up. If they say no, you get out of their face. This is if it's your husband, it's if it's your wife. If they say no, leave them alone. But the thing is it's very difficult to do that for the codependent because we want to control things. Because if they feel bad, can anybody else finish that that sentence? If they feel bad, I feel bad. Classic codependent. If they feel bad, I can't function. If my child or my grandchild, seems like they're feeling bad, I feel bad, right? In other words, you can know for sure that if you say, is there anything that you need? Right. And it's a huge challenge. I see it in Master's Path for people that go through yoga therapy training. It's one of the biggest things that shows up that we have to sort of cut through. And it takes time to cut through it. Because when you're sitting across from somebody and they start getting in their story, then the next thing you know, your codependency, you're like, oh my God, I have so many tools and I could really fix this for you. I could really make this better for you. But no, you can't. You may have some things that you can offer them, but if you are in control of them as a teacher, as an employer, as a whatever, see, control is I love you, therefore I control you. I marry you. Like in the United States, what we call marriage is really an exchange of possession, like this. Instead of going, no, wait a minute, here's my field and there's my partner's field, right? We respect one another's physical and emotional boundaries, and I take care of me. He or she takes care of him or her, and the same thing in friendships. But this can be tough because when we're used to the tension, to the tug of war of a codependent relationship, then we feel like something's wrong. When things are cool, have any of you, and this can be rhetorical, ever had the experience that everything was just really cool in your friendship or your relationship, and there was no tension, but you looked for some? It's like you pick a fight. Have you ever been able to look in hindsight that you maybe picked a fight and didn't even realize it, and you start to notice this, because that's a classic codependent, to kind of pick a fight, because a codependent has a lot of trouble with, the term is santosha, with feeling a sense of contentment within their own space, within their own being. And let me tell you that, coming back to, is there anything you need from me? And then just respect their space, man. Respect their space. Let them have space. Just say, okay, let me know if there's something that you need. Right? Now, the next thing is, which this one gets really tough, is what boundaries are and setting boundaries. What boundaries really are, it begins with, as Paige was saying earlier, is that boundaries begin with you first. You learning to set your own boundaries for what you're willing to entertain within your own mind and what you're not going to entertain. If you don't set those boundaries with yourself, you're certainly not going to be able to set them with other people. So let's say if someone is treating you in a way that is really causing you to want to leave the relationship. Well, what some codependents will do is just stay until there's enough drama that forces them to leave. So they just burn a bridge. It's what cancel culture is. That's what cancel culture is, like quintessential. I'm so codependent. I don't know how to set boundaries. So you know what? When people don't behave like I just talk bad about them and look at them really badly, and then I just quit them. I just walk away without ever speaking truth or setting boundaries, setting my own boundaries. Right. And now I want you guys to remember this too. The most compassionate thing that you can do for someone is to be direct. Codependents will say sometimes, I just need to find a nicer way of saying it, of setting the boundary. And that codependent, recovering codependent, sets a boundary, and the other person has no idea what they just said. I know, I used to do that many years ago. My daughter, when she was a teenager, she had a friend that was staying with us for about a month. She was having a lot of trouble at home, and her mom and I were friends, and she was cool with her coming to stay with us. And of course, my youngest daughter was super duper excited. This is many years ago, because my daughter's 37 now. They were like 17. My daughter's super duper excited because her best friend's coming over to stay with us. Well, about a week into it, my youngest daughter was like, Mom, you've got to talk to her. She says, I need you to talk to her. Like, she's getting my stuff. She's wearing my clothes. She's getting my, I had that snack in the fridge. And what was happening? She was crossing her boundaries all over the place. Well, I'm like, sure, I'm a codependent mama. I'll set boundaries for you instead of teaching you how to do it at 17, right? I didn't know at the time to think, is this something that she could do for herself? Might I be able to guide her in doing it for herself? No, being the good, healthy, codependent mama, unhealthy codependent mama I was, sure, I'll do that for you. So we're in the car, and the time comes. So I talk to her, We get home, we get out of the car, and Stephanie goes, what just happened? She goes, I didn't hear you say anything about anything that had to do with anything that I asked you to say. Well, see, understand, I'm in the midst of my whole codependent mess. I can't really see. I thought I did. I was like, and not only that, I couldn't even see that it wasn't even my place to set those boundaries. I mean, she was close to being an adult. I needed to teach her to do it, and she needed to set those boundaries because that person wasn't bothering me. But what do I do as a codependent? I go, sure, I'm going to rescue this and I'm going to take care of this for you. Well, it took a lot of years later for me to figure out, no, that wasn't my place to do that. It wasn't my place to rescue her. It wasn't my place to fix it. It was instead my place to say, what's bothering you about that? Would you like some ways, some different things that you might say to be able to set some boundaries so that you can talk to her about it? She might go, no, I want you to do it. And I'd have to say, you know what? No, that's really not for me to do. That's for you to do. That's your relationship with her. And you're almost an adult now. But a codependent is going to have a lot of trouble with that because I don't want to see my daughter unhappy. And not only that, I'm also caregiving for the rest of the neighborhood. Everybody just come on. Right? Can you see how deep that was? Like it wasn't even on the surface, but we do that because we don't know, right? The line isn't clear. But the way that you know, right? The way that you know that you've crossed from codependent from care, being a compassionate, caregiving person, the way that you know is that there's a part of you, whether it's time, money, emotional aspect of being, health, self care, things you do like your yoga practice, you give up your yoga practice. I've heard people say, I can't do that Zoom yoga because my house is too distracting. I'm like, well, you need to clean up your household, man. There sounds like there's some serious boundaries. We've had a lot of people say my house is too distracting. I'm like, oh my bejesus, that's codependence to be able to not be able to set boundaries within your own home. And especially if you're the leader in your own home, that you can't say, hey, I'm doing this thing here. I need this hour. That's setting boundaries. So the way that you start to know that you're crossing that line is that you can see very clearly that whether it's self-care, time, money, whatever it is, and you need a good percentage of self-care before you're giving anything to other people, that when you start sacrificing that, you are crossing the line. Those are just little ways to kind of help you to see that. That happens a lot, right, in romantic relationships, I know, or kind of in the olden days, where I came up in the Cinderella syndrome, where you do everything you can't, like you totally lose yourself. And then like 10 years later, you're super mad and want to divorce your person because you blame them because you completely lost who you are. That's what a codependent does. Codependent goes into a relationship with someone, completely loses who they are, sets no boundaries, and then gets really mad at them because they lost who they are. Because the truth is, what I learned about being a recovering codependent is love and being a loving experience for others means respecting all others' freedoms. That being love even means that if they want to go, they are free to go. You create a space for them to go, even. Right? That being love is, I'm in such a state of love that I love so much that you're absolutely free to not love me back. You're even free to dislike me. That I will not try to control you if you don't like me. That's tough, because for the codependent, the thought of being rejected is like, some people would prefer to be slapped across the face than rejected. which I guess they're kind of the same. But no, yeah. Right. So it's important for us to know, like when you've crossed that line from caring into the realm of codependency, you'll see that you may not even know who you are anymore. Now, with all this and kind of bringing all this to a close, this really isn't about some rugged individualism, because a really healthy individual recognizes their need for other humans. A truly healthy individual is not codependent, but there's an interdependency. In that I know, like healthy individualism knows that to express my individualism, I need others to do that. We need one another. Right? It's an interesting thing to understand that in truth we're one species. And as one species, we're like this one big species called the human species. And sort of the term rugged individualism is I don't really care about others except what they can do for me. And so for them, I'm going to do for them. And I'm going to care for them because when I'm caring, I feel in control. I've got tabs on this person and I know what's happening. But healthy individualism recognizes that I can never really know my own power, empowerment, and my own individual nature or dharma without the presence of the rest of humankind. Because we do need each other. But a codependent generally is going to feel very afraid to say, I need you. Right? To authentically, I need you. I need humankind. I need the human to be a part of the human species. I need to be able to express compassion and empathy because that's the nature of evolution. I was listening to Bruce Lipton today, as a matter of fact, on spontaneous evolution. And he says the disconnection of society is the beginning of a devolving of humankind. That it's through true healthy connection, transcendent of codependency, but true healthy human connection, which comes about by healthy boundary setting and clarity on your field and another's field, and responsibility for your own field, that we develop empathy, which is the highest form of, of humankind. And he said, we don't really evolve as individuals. He said, the idea that I evolve is a misconception. He says, evolution is something that we do as a species, because as an individual, it's the idea of a rising tide lifts all boats. It only takes 20%, a good strong 20%, the principle 80-20 rule from Pareto's 80-20 rule. It only takes 20% of a strong intentional evolutionary movement to draw the 80%. So it's not so much that the individual is the one that evolves. And he was talking about this. He says, you've got to understand that evolution occurs as a species. And to truly be in a process of evolution, you've got to be engaged with the species. You've got to be in healthy connection with others. And we do need one another. And we need deep connection with one another. And we need deep relationships with one another. Finally, I saw a TikTok the other day. It was an Australian woman, and it was one of the most beautiful things. And I swear it would have been something that in the day I would have made. And she said, "What is wrong with us? She said, this probably maybe was pre-COVID. I don't know. She said, but as a species, we really want to be kissing each other all over the face. We want to be holding one another's hands. She says, what has happened to us? We are meant to be touching one another. And just because we touch one another or kiss another or close to another, it's, from the more devolved mind, we think, oh no, we can't do that because that's somehow sexual in nature. But we have lost the sense of like physical touch and physical connection just as a human species with one another. And I loved it when she said, we're all meant to be kissing each other all over the face. And I agree. I really do. But there's a deep evolution that has to occur for us to really understand what that means. Because from a codependent perspective, a codependent might go, exactly. And you never leave me. But remember, a true synthesized relationship, your arms are wide open, right? People can come and go, and they're free, really free. Just thank you all so much. Just kind of opening up to this idea. And really what I'd love to encourage you toward, really my very favorite book on this, I don't even think I have it in the shop now, but it's by Melody Beattie. Melody, and her last name is Beattie, Beattie, I think. And it's her latest book on codependency. I sent it to you. What was it called? This is really the best one because it's the most up to date. The New Codependency. So she really goes a lot into talking about, because in her early codependent work, and she really was a spearhead for codependency like 35 years ago, because I started studying her like that many years ago. She goes more into this book around kind of how the pendulum can sometimes swing, and people are like, well, what about care and compassion? Because we want to be compassionate, we want to be caring as well. So I really want to encourage you guys to check that out. It's on Audible. You can listen to it in your car, but really something very, very important to start to bring to the forefront of our conversations, because true codependency is exactly the opposite of the state of yoga. Any comments or questions before we close? Or anything from online or? I hope it was helpful, because it really is something that comes from my heart. And, because, you guys need to remember something about this idea of codependency. It was really born out of our innocence, and just trying to get control of a world that we had no control over, just trying to survive. So as each of us as individuals seek to heal from that codependency, and then we can really start to step into this, to beginner's mind and into our own innocence. Because we really are meant to love each other, but not imprison one another, not possess one another, but to really love each other. And I do so love you all. And thank you all so much for being online as well. I love you as well. I love you, Blake. I thought maybe he was raising his hand because he was going, I love you too, Papa. Thought I had a revival going for a moment. Yes, Blake. Blake asked a question, is codependency learned, or is that just kind of the way you are? Well, if you've got a family history of that's what's been passed down, time and again, and again. And also, Blake, we live in a very codependent society, because there's three main types of karma. There's your own individual karma, and then there's your familial karma, your family of origin karma, and then our sort of collective, like global karma. So the answer to your question is yes. And then, oftentimes if you're susceptible to it because you came from, a codependent family, which is really most all of us, so it becomes stronger, especially if you go to a workplace where sort of that codependency is valued, which is most workplaces where, people that run around acting really stressed out. I mean, how many of you have been in a workplace where if you don't act stressed out, like you're almost kind of punished for it in a way, or they look down on you? That's a high level of codependent. That is a highly codependent workplace. That if you're not running around going, I get this all the time from yogis. They get these really high level evaluations. And I have heard frequently, I got a great evaluation, just scored really high, except there was one complaint. I don't ever really feel, they don't feel like I take my work serious enough because I don't get stressed out enough. So there's a definite teaching of codependence, because I mean, I've heard that from more than one person where they were in essence saying, you need to kind of behave a little bit more codependent and controlling. So I feel better about how you're behaving. Boundary setting isn't like I do this, so I feel better about you. And so, yeah, it's definitely learned, but it can be learned and reinforced later on, but it's definitely learned in our own growing up. And, as a couple, it's awesome when you're working on this kind of thing together, to where you can, if you're with someone that's also working on it, you can really say, did that feel controlling to you? Because that is the hallmark right there. And honestly, you can even say a statement like, that sounds very freeing, but if your internal is transactional and like, and if you don't do it, then fill in the blank, people can feel it, right? And they know it. And again, you want to be forgiving, especially in your relationships with one another, because, yeah, I mean, it's learned, it's reinforced. But, if you're working together with someone, you can say, okay, did that, I feel students try to control me frequently because most people come into yoga in a very codependent place. One of the very first things I start doing is I'm like, you need to know, I'm not going to do things the way you want me to do them. That's not how this relationship is going to work. I don't control you. You don't control me. That's not how this works. Right. And even on the subtlest level, I respect your emotional boundaries and you're going to learn to respect my emotional boundaries. Right. And I mean, like I said, Rasa yoga training is quintessential recovering codependent training, So like when you're together with someone, one really simple question that you can do to kind of help unlearn it, like if you say something and you've kind of felt after you said it, you can ask, did that feel controlling to you? And if they say yes, believe them. Let it be. Go, wow. Okay, thanks for letting me know that. Right? Or because some signs where it feels controlling is you'll feel icky. There's sort of an icky kind of, if someone's trying to control you, you'll sort of feel that. If they're trying to control you emotionally, you'll kind of feel that. Or if they're offering you something to fix you, but they're doing it out of love, and you feel it, a boundary to be set might be, I'm feeling really controlled right now. You're not saying you're controlling me. It's like, this is what I'm feeling right now. I need to step back because this is what I'm feeling. Right. So I don't know. That's a great question, Blake. Just, it's all learned behavior and it's all survival, trying to survive.